This is the holiday season, and as thoughts turn to cold and snow and frost, my thoughts turn to food. The thought occurred to me to make things with food instead of eating it. Although I must tell you, as the project went on, I probably consumed at least one whole pound cake single-handedly. The idea was to use the charming and seasonal gingerbread house idea, but carry it a little bit further and make a castle instead. After all, a man's cottage can be his castle, and so it all seemed quite logical. The first thing to do were some sketches to generally proportion the castle. So here we have the front elevation, the front door, and then carrying it into plan view to check some of the placement of towers and so forth. So the next step was to see if all these ideas worked, and to make an accurate scale or an accurate model using a white foam core board. And of course, a castle is not a castle without towers and the traditional conical roof peaks. So here's one tower, and there's another. And the third tower, which is a battlement right alongside the front entrance. So now we have a castle, pretty much complete. But we need something else. The front gate looks a little bit blank. So although we have little pieces of tape showing and key words written on the various parts, we now have a very nice, honest-to-gosh fairy castle. But it's only in cardboard. Now we have to make it into cake. Not terribly impressive, but this was the first step, building the base. Supporting the foundations of the castle is just a simple square made of sponge cake, and on top of that, a pound cake recipe with some molasses in it to darken the color of the batter, and just a little baking soda to keep it from rising too fast. And the next step is to start rolling the dough for the walls or the towers and all the fixtures that will eventually, I hope, make a very entrancing fairy castle. The towers are made by taking a flat pattern, which is the length of the material it takes to go around the diameter of the tower, cutting that into a flat sheet of dough, which is then baked. You can see the two towers. One of them didn't come out quite as a complete cylinder. There's a gap there. But when they come out of the oven, there's the paper model. You can see that the tower forms are being used now for the dough forming, so they're not on the little model mock-up. But as the flat rectangles come out of the oven, they're laid onto the white paper wrap that you see here. The form is then placed on top of the dough. And because the dough is flexible, it's still very hot. You simply roll it up and put rubber bands around it to hold it in shape until the dough cools and it holds its shape, as you can see. From then on, it's very fragile, but nevertheless, you have a very thin, elegant dough cylinder. So our castle is now starting to rise, and the tallest of the three towers at the rear left corner is just about ready to come out of the oven. Well, I guess it's time to take another look and see what our progress has been since we last had our little chat. You can see that the forms for the towers have now been used to make the towers themselves in gingerbread dough, wrapping them around the forms as they come out of the oven before they harden. And they harden very fast. It takes about 30 seconds, and they're too hard to really wrap around anything. But here we have the three towers in position. The rings around the towers underneath the cone roofs are spacers, and then around those in turn will be a curved parapet with the familiar crenellated hedge, which makes castles. You can see the cardboard model for the living quarters sitting there without its roof, because the roof is made of gingerbread dough, as you see. It's resting on its form, and it's easier to make the roof in one piece if you can take it out of the oven have a form ready and drape it over and sort of pat it and push it around while it's still pliable. And then when you lift it onto the castle, it's just simply easier to manage. The dormer sections were too small and they broke, as you would see. The two little towers will eventually go on each side of the gate. And here you see the bay window extension with its pattern just above it. And again, I made this in one piece because it's just easier to handle. It's an addition to the left side of the living quarters as you look forward from the castle's window. So now we're on our way. There's a ways to go yet. There's frosting. There's all of the major vertical pieces for the house to be made yet. But it is a fascinating exercise. And echoing through the house is the typical cry of the hardcore gingerbread enthusiast, cut dough. We've been very busy baking and putting the towers together, frosting the outside surfaces, gluing the parapet spacers to the tower cylinders, and getting ready for the final decorating phase of the castle assembly. You see the different pieces for the house part here. There's a little bay window outset. There's the rear parapet for the wall. The entrance facade, the rear facade of the house, and the side wall. And some of the front gate. And these two little towers with peaks for the front gate position. So our castle is slowly coming to life, and the next stage will be to raise the exterior walls, put on the parapets, plaster with the trim color, and we're going to find ourselves very shortly ready to move in. It's very elegant in the crisp, frosty whites and off gray pinks. And the pattern frosting on the walls and the roof, I think, give it a nice decorative touch. The doorway and the outer wall, the two little minarets over the front entrance gate. But what I decided to do was, because it's not a real castle, it's a fairy castle. And so the frosting on the walls is more decorative in swirl patterns. The detail recall, give an impression of fantasy. So this is this year's combination of cooking and model building. The 1990 to 91 Christmas and New Year's season. Gingerbread Fairy Castle.